Hello and welcome to bowraven.com, and in this short video I'm going to talk about the challenges that new business owners face when they set up a business. And in this case I've actually come up with 31 challenges. I wanted to list as many as I could possibly think of. Some are more important than others, but here we go. Anyway, so what are the challenges for starting a new business? So firstly, the idea needs to be good. Of course, good ideas sell well, or products or services designed around good ideas are what sells well. And it's making sure that your idea is good in the first place before you actually go ahead. And I always recommend that you do your market research. These days with the internet and Google, it's a much easier process to do than it used to be. But even so, it is still sometimes quite difficult to actually find out what people are searching for. But using Google and some of their tools, you can actually see the level of search terms that people are using to find things. But of course, if your idea is about something that already exists on the market and there's competition out there, then at least you know that there is a market for your product. However, of course, if it's brand new, you don't actually know whether there's a market for it. So just be a bit careful with how you approach that. This is an important one. Number 2, does the business you're starting involve a passion? Now, I've learnt this the hard way. I've set up businesses, I've bought businesses, and I've invested in businesses. And the common theme in all of those is, did I have a passion for the business? And of course, the only way of finding out is to do it. I remember when I bought my fitted furniture business, my wife said to me, is building furniture your passion? And I said, well, there's only one way to find out. And as it turns out, it wasn't. I have now stepped back from the business, and I have got a management team in there, managing director, financial director, and so on, running the business for me. Although having said that, that was rather forced upon me through health reasons. But in the end, it's actually got me to do what I really love doing, which is creating products, writing articles for bowraven.com and speaking to you now. This is something I love doing. So what's the next one? Well, obtaining finance is a tough one these days. And that's tough enough, even if you are an existing business. Banks these days are very, very picky, should I say, as to who they'll lend money to. And of course, these days you're not going to get away with, certainly without giving a personal guarantee. And if the funding that you're looking for is anything significant, then they're going to be looking for security. And if you don't have security to secure that funding or that lending, then you're not going to get it. There is a lot of crowdfunding out there these days, and that's a growing market. The last statistic I heard that it was doubling year on year. But even so, with that, you need to have a track record, and it's very difficult if you're starting out to borrow from even that source. So this is one of the challenges that faces all businesses, but in particular it would be a difficult challenge for a new startup business. Of course, you can use finance from your own family, from friends, and so on. But if you are looking to obtain outside finance by way of an investment, you need to make sure that you have a sound business plan and prepare some very good cash flow forecasts. Number 4 is the challenge is about whether you're in it for the long term. I've set up new businesses, and at the outset it's very exciting. But sometimes, as you go through it, well, I say sometimes, I think always, I don't think I've had any business that I haven't been sideswiped by something or other, or something unexpected hasn't come along. So you need to realise that you've got to stick it out for the long term. And sometimes, for certain people, this becomes more of a challenge than for others. And I always say it's by having a can-do attitude is essential for running a small business. But I think that most entrepreneurs do have that attitude, and most entrepreneurs succeed in the end. Number 5, hard work. This is something that I don't want you to underestimate if you are a new entrepreneur looking to start your new business. It can involve long hours which is number 6 actually. I'll talk about these together. At the outset, if for example your reason is because you no longer want a boss, what you need to realise is that running your own business will involve longer hours. Yes, you don't have a boss breathing down your neck, but at the end of the day, the buck stops at you, and I'll talk about that a bit more further down. This is particularly true, particularly with the hard work and the longer hours as well, really. Actually thinking about it, is that where you don't have the staff, and perhaps the finance or cash to employ staff, this does involve more hard work on your part and certainly the longer hours. And what I would say is just be careful that fatigue doesn't set in and that you don't get what's known as burnout, because that would set you back significantly. And if the business is very much dependent upon you at this point, then you've just got to be a little bit careful with that. As I already mentioned, the buck does stop with you, because as the business owner, you are ultimately responsible for everything, which can run from customer care through to making sure that you're dealing with all the relevant health and safety and employment law. And don't forget, you need to make sure your accounts are done, your taxes are paid. Yes, you may have people to help you with that, but if something goes wrong, ultimately the blame will always end up on your desk, because you've got no one above you to point to or to say, well, actually it's his or her fault. It might be someone else's fault, but ultimately you have to take responsibility for that. Which does lead on to my point 8, which is to say that it is actually lonely at the top. Running a small business, there are certain things that you're not able to speak to your employees about. There are certain discussions, for example, if you have a business which is having cash flow difficulties, I wouldn't suggest you go and speak to your employees about that, because you don't want to start worrying them, because they might jump ship. They might think, well, their job is at risk, so therefore it would be better to go somewhere else. If further down the track you are looking to sell your business, it's not something initially you want to speak to your employees. So this is a challenge for all businesses, but particularly at the beginning, to realise that that's the world that you've stepped into. But you might want to consider joining groups whereby there are like-minded individuals. And I would perhaps recommend that you look at the Institute of Directors. In fact, I've got a link to it here on this website, or this article I should say. And there you can chat to people along with getting the other benefits. However, depending on how you've set your business up, to become a member of the Institute of Directors, you do have to be a director. And that can be of your own business, but of course it has to be a limited company. Certainly in the UK, that's how it works. So the next challenge on my list is time management. At the outset, and of course, down the track, depending on how you run your business, of course, too, business owners do like to do everything themselves, which does lead on to the next one, which is the lack of delegation. But let me talk a little bit about time management, which is where delegation is so important. And it's about working out where it is to best spend your time. And at the outset, this does become a challenge, I accept that, but it's recognizing that and trying to plan your time and focus on those things that will achieve the most within your business. As already mentioned a minute ago, the lack of delegation. Now, of course, one of the challenges is when you're first starting out is that you may not have the people, because you don't have the cash flow yet, to delegate to. However, I will say that entrepreneurs find it very difficult to delegate because they want to get it 100% right in many cases. And they're worried that employees will make mistakes. That will happen, but without delegation, you'll never grow your business. So make sure that as part of your business plan, you do set up a management structure. Work out what roles are going to be done by what department, by what person within the business, by identifying them as a role. It might be at this stage that you do that part of the role, but further down the track, it makes it much easier to start delegating and employing people specifically for that role. This one ties in nicely, actually, and that's having an understanding family. I'm not afraid to admit, in one of my first businesses, In fact, it was when I ran my own chartered accounting practice, I actually ended up losing my wife to someone else because I had underestimated the amount of hours that I was putting in and the amount of hours I needed to put in to start up and run that business. Funny enough, it did actually end up doing me a favour, I suppose, in the end, because it made me really look at my business and it made me step back from it. I mean, it's sad that it happened. The other part of it is if you have children, you need to realise that there may be certain sacrifices that you'll have to make, that you may not see your children to a large extent while you're certainly in the early stages of setting up your business. So you need to have an understanding wife or husband, and as your children grow older, understanding children too. Number 13, this is a biggie actually, cash flow management. But this does apply to businesses all the way through, keeping an eye on your cash flow, making sure you've got enough cash in the bank to meet your bills as and when they fall due. But with a newly started business, this is perhaps a bigger challenge as everything is new. But I would recommend that you do prepare business plans and that you have done some good cash flow projections. But don't just prepare those and stick them in the drawer somewhere. Make sure that you follow them. Make sure that the cash that you said that you were going to be receiving is actually flowing through into your bank account. And this is twofold. Firstly, that the sales that you thought were going to be made are being made. But secondly, that the money is being paid to you by those customers within your required payment terms. And I know this is challenging for business owners, or new business owners I should say, because it's having to switch between selling to someone, certainly if you're dealing one-on-one at the beginning stages of your business, to then switch to credit control and pushing people for their money. Some people do find that difficult. But unless you have what I would argue is excess working capital, so you had a reasonable amount of money to set the business up, or you had a capital injection of some sort, sometimes you may have to continue working in your job to keep the cash coming in to pay for your personal living expenses. So that's even more of a challenge. Number 14 is the lack of knowledge and know-how. What you'll quickly realise when you start running your business is that you're expected to know everything. Well, of course you don't know everything. And depending on your background, will depend upon what your knowledge levels are. And it does become a very steep learning curve when you're setting up your business and when you actually start to run it. Because you need to know everything from the raw materials and products through to how to sell them to customers. And certain people are better at certain things. You know, it might be that your background is in marketing and selling, so you'll do very well at the selling side. And hopefully if it's an industry that you're going into that you're passionate about and then you'll know about materials and products, the items that you're going to be selling. However, how much do you know about health and safety? How much do you know about employment law? And so on and so forth. So it is a big challenge. And this challenge can continue on through running your business, but it's emphasized at the start. One thing that you could think about is to start a franchise, because ordinarily, depending on, of course, the franchise, you do get a lot of training with that. There are other companies that have set up the franchises locally, or they won't be too locally, because of course you don't need the, I say, local competition as it were. So you can speak to other franchisees to help you as well. But you get a lot of training and support with the franchise. So that's something that's worth considering. But of course then that does come with the downside is that you aren't running purely your own business, insofar as you do have to follow their rules and guidelines as to how they want their franchise run. And of course you do also have to pay them a franchise fee for the privilege of that. So your profits will be eaten too as a result of running a franchise. The next one, and I will say this does apply to businesses going forward, is staff management. Once you're at a point where you do take on staff, this does present sometimes quite big challenges. I know during my course of running different businesses, I think I found the hardest one was when I took on a manufacturing business, And that in itself has brought all sorts of HR challenges, I would say. And you need to make sure that you follow the legislation so that you don't get yourself into trouble. And with this particular point, I would always recommend, unless you can afford to have an in-house person, is to outsource this. And actually, it doesn't cost huge amounts of money. And it can depend on the size of business, but if you've got 1 or 2 employees, to have someone on a retainer, it actually, when you look into it, doesn't cost huge amounts of money, because you are expected to know all the law. And what you don't want to do, be in a position whereby all of a sudden you are faced with a particular challenge from an employee and you don't know what to do. The worst thing you can do is to go about it in the wrong way, because you could find yourself in a tribunal, and you could find yourself on the receiving end of having to pay out huge sums of money. So be careful with that one. Personal health is a big one, which resonates with me significantly, having just gone through a tough time for me. I did suffer from cancer, and I do put it down to the stresses and strains of running a business. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it was a contributing factor. So never underestimate the stress that running a business can put on your personal health. Make sure that you are exercising. Make sure that you are eating well, because it's very easy for entrepreneurs to get stuck into running their business and these sort of things fall by the wayside. Make sure that you get the necessary help, but also speak to people. The point I was talking about above about being lonely at the top, don't bottle it all up. Find other business owners to talk about your problems, because a problem shared is a problem halved, and in business that does resonate very well. And even now myself, I do speak to other business people. I speak to my mentor as well, because by sharing the problem they can come up with something that you hadn't even thought about, or actually make you feel better, because the problem may not actually be as bad as you first thought. Number 17 is developing the vision. I always think that entrepreneurs are great at envisioning, and they make the change. I mean, most things that we now take for granted in life were once thought about as an invention by an entrepreneur. For example, take the Wright brothers, who saw it through to giving us the first aeroplane. But never underestimate the challenge of developing that, particularly if you've invented something, particularly if you're first to the market. Never underestimate the uphill battle of trying to bring a product or a service to the market. My second business, I ended up hitting my head against brick wall after brick wall, and in the end I did have to give up with that business. And it's knowing when to give up, because that's another thing that entrepreneurs, or a good entrepreneur, doesn't do, is he doesn't give up. And I certainly don't, but I had to get to the point whereby I realized that this product, in fact it was a software product, was never actually going to sell, and to step back from it. But developing that vision and staying with it is a challenge for new businesses, particularly where it's something brand new to the market that's been invented. Business location. They always say that location is key. Now, whether that's a shop, or actually, in fact, I will add to that, if that is your website. If you sell online, location is key. And the location, as far as the website is concerned, is number one on the search engines. But in particular, it's number one on Google, because I think it's about 80 to 90% of all search traffic comes through Google. So whether you are a physical business and or online business, location is key. Now, of course, the challenge here, and particularly for new businesses, is that to get the right location, be it retail space or be it on the net, is very expensive. So unless you've got significant spare funds, this is going to be a challenge. And of course, with a new website, getting traffic to that, because it won't be ranking to get the natural traffic, you're going to have to spend money on pay-per-click. You're going to have to spend money on perhaps Facebook ads until you get that naturally search traffic. But even then, if your industry that you're in is very competitive, getting that search engine traffic to your website is going to be a challenge, because there are going to be websites at the top that can afford to pump money into their website to keep them at the top of Google. Well, actually, I've talked about number 19, really, your website and web traffic combined into number 18. And what I will add to that is, if you are at the outset and you don't have a lot of traffic coming naturally to your website, it's vital that you focus on your click-through rate. It's vital that when you're looking at doing your pay-per-click adverts, that you make sure that your adverts that are presented on Google are good ones, but also that they are converting, and you need to focus your time on making sure that all works out, because you don't want to be spending a lot of money on pay-per-click traffic only to find that the visitor leaves your website without buying from you. I mean, it may be that they leave and they come back again, but ultimately you want to make sure that the money you're throwing at pay-per-click, for example, is working. And the other one is Facebook adverts. Facebook does work very well to get traffic to your website, and it does help you to convert. And there's some very good tools within Facebook these days that you can use to track people around on the internet as well. Number 20 is finding good staff. Now, at the outset, you don't have, or you probably don't have, the skills necessary to interview people. It may be that in your role before you set up your business that you did actually do interviews, but taking any business, this is a challenge to find good staff, because good staff come at a price, and finding good staff, because if they are good, people want to retain them, so they pay them well, so this will cost you more. Using employment agencies also is very costly. So then you need to do adverts, but getting those adverts right is difficult, or is a challenge, but also you'll find that they are very expensive, and they're more expensive than your marketing type adverts. So this is where you need to become a bit more creative, really, using LinkedIn, but that does depend upon the industry you're in, of course. So what you really want to be doing is find hardworking, conscientious and trustworthy people, but that in itself is a challenge. And it's recognizing that that is the case. Number 21 is finding the right customers. When you first start out, it may be that you want each and every customer that comes your way. But as time goes on, you may begin to learn, and this is a bit of a steep learning curve, that not all customers are equal. There are some customers out there that will look for the slightest chink in your armour. They'll look for loopholes in your company policies, and there are some customers that no matter what you do, how you treat them, they'll always exploit you. And sometimes it disheartens me, I have to be honest with this, because I always have the adage that treat people like you like to be treated, and it'll always be alright in the end. But unfortunately, there are always people that aren't like you out there, and although you think that they're going to be a nice person and treat you well, they don't. And the minute your back is turned, they'll stab you in the back. And basically what they do is they drain your energy, they're poison to your business, they can damage your reputation and goodwill, and usually all it is to do is to get money off or to get something for free. Worse still, there are some out there that are looking to sue you for money. I always remember the story of the lady who went into McDonald's and she burnt herself on a hot coffee. I mean, how ridiculous is that? You know, she should take responsibility. She was the one that spilt the hot coffee on herself. We all know that if we drink a coffee, it's hot. But, you know, that in itself is, well, it's just the world we live in. So this is a challenge at the outset, is to start to work out the type of customer that you want for your business. And it's working out that actually you don't have to accept everyone as a customer. You are entitled to say no to people or to price certain customers accordingly. Number 22, unforeseen challenges. I think as you go on in business life, you realise that this is something that does happen. It's certainly happened to me throughout my business career since I set up my first business back in 1990. And at the outset, this is a challenge that new business owners have to realize. You can set out the most beautiful business plan and the most accurate and well thought out cash flow forecasts, only to find that you hadn't thought of something. I know when I set up my accounting practice, I budgeted for so many clients coming on board, but I got the timing wrong in terms of how soon I would bill them. Yes, I got the clients, but then what happened is that by the time I set them up and by the time they were actually paying me was further down the track. So although, yes, I got the clients, my profit and loss account and cash flow suffered as a result of it. So it's to recognize that there will be unforeseen challenges and to hit them head on when they occur. I think the next challenge is keeping an eye on the competition. And I think when you're first starting out, this could be a bigger challenge than it could be once you're established. That's not to say that you shouldn't keep your eye off the ball when it comes to competition. But I remember reading Richard Branson's book when he talked about introducing Virgin Cola, and he went into battle with Coke, and in his book he admits that he got that wrong and he did lose, because of course they've got the power, they've got the clout with the supermarkets, with the chains that sell their Coke in bars, clubs and so on, and they were able to battle it out and reduce their prices and fight a stronger battle than he did. So be aware that your competition may not like you down the street from them, and they may well fight. So bear that in mind. So that could become a bit of a challenge for you newly starting out. One challenge that people do struggle with is beginning with the end in mind. If you start out with a particular view of where you want your business to go, what your exit strategy is and so on, this can help you with your business and taking it forward. It might be how you set up your business plan and your cash flow forecasts so that what you actually achieve and what you do with running your business is what you aim for and what you targeted for. So some people have a challenge with this because it seems so far off in the distance, so far off in the future. But I know I've spoken to many people that said, I wish I'd thought about the exit strategy certainly a number of years before they started to look to exit. But some people have said they'd wish they'd done it at the outset. Client dependence. This is another big one actually, and this does apply to businesses further down the track. And it's more of a challenge when you're starting out because, of course, each new customer, depending on the type of business you're in, could represent a large percentage of your business. So as you grow, this, of course, will change, but make sure you do focus on that and make sure that no client represents more than 20% of your turnover, or ideally 10%, because what you've got to realize is that if you did something wrong, or a competition came in that was cheaper than you or better than you or whatever it was, and you lost that one big client, how is that going to affect your bottom line? How is that going to affect your cash flow? So you need to really consider that as you start to grow, and don't become dependent upon one client. And if you start out with that thought in mind, when you get a huge client, for example, you can make sure that you look out for other big clients to balance out that turnover and balance out that cash flow. I do remember when I had my accounting practice that I had a customer and they had a client that represented somewhere between 70 to 80% of their turnover, and they lost that customer, and his expression was it was like turning the Titanic. They had to let staff go, they had overheads to match that size of the business and so on. So it can be a very big challenge in the short term, but of course it can make your business go under. In his case, he managed to survive it, but I do know of a business recently that I had dealings with that they had somewhere around about 70-80% of sales to one customer, and they pulled the plug, and the business has now gone into liquidation. Number 26 is business owner dependence. This is one of the big factors used in business valuation. So I think what you need to try and think about is to not have your business highly dependent upon you, which ties into one of my previous comments about delegation. Now, in the early days, this is more difficult because you'll probably have to be doing a lot of the work within the business. But as you move on, you need to step back so that you aren't the one that the customers are dealing with. You aren't the one that is the name of the business. The name of the business needs to be standing independent upon you, of you, so that if in the future you decide to sell the business, they aren't thinking that you are the one that's actually being sold, as it were. So then it would have less value. And this is something that is more of a challenge when you start out, particularly if you haven't made provision for it or you hadn't thought about it in the first place. The next one is control. And this also really ties into the delegation and customer dependence. I would say most, if not all, entrepreneurs like to be in control, and it's in their DNA, I think. So this is about letting go. It's about being happy to let go of control. And I know at the outset, this is a challenge for people, and it's accepting that it's okay to let go of control, as you've got to realize that in order to grow your business, you have to give control to other people within the business. This is something actually I thought about as I was writing prejudices. Funny enough, on my recent trip back from my holiday to Barbados, actually, I watched the film Selma, and funny enough, I didn't actually realise that this was in my lifetime, and it was about Martin Luther King and his fight for the rights for the blacks in America. And this happened in the 60s, which, although I probably should have known, it hadn't really sunk in that during my lifetime there was the segregation, there was blacks couldn't vote and so on. And what I still recognise today is that there is prejudice against sex, religion and race, and this is something that you may come across. It may be not obvious at the time that this is what is affecting your business, but it's to understand that there are prejudices out there. And all I can say is that maybe watch the film Selma, and Martin Luther King was a peaceful man, but he was determined. So you could call him an entrepreneur in his own right, albeit that he wasn't actually running a business here, but he had dogged determination. He wanted to make sure that what he believed in affected a change within America. So it's actually a very good film to watch, but it's taking on board the fact that no matter what prejudice you come across, is that you carry on regardless, because they are the people that are prejudiced are few and far between, and there are what I would call nice people out there that don't have these horrible prejudices. Understanding accounting information. Now, unless your background is similar to mine, where you're an accountant, chartered accountant or what have you, understanding a profit and loss account and or a balance sheet is a challenge, and particularly when you're starting out. It is a challenge for some people that have been running a business for a long time, that they may still not actually understand what they are. Actually, in this article, if you go to this link here, I've written an article about understanding a profit and loss account, and this link here is about understanding a balance sheet, so you can go off and have a quick read of those if you are in this situation. So having an understanding of your profit and loss account, for example, is important because you need to understand in particular your gross profit margins. It's a key metric to making sure that your business is profitable. So this is comparing what you sell an item for versus what it costs you to either buy it prior to selling or to manufacture or make it prior to selling. And that's more of a challenge for a manufacturing company to work out or know all their costs associated with making something. But that's one of the key metrics within a profit and loss account. And the profit and loss account can summarize all your information. either for a month, a quarter, or for 12 months. And I think certainly having a bit of an understanding of your profit and loss figures would help you to understand how you can grow that business. And in fact, there's a link here as well here to our increased profit software. And having a moderate understanding of your profit and loss figures, just to put them in, would be useful, but it's not the end of the world if you don't, because actually with that particular software it does come with a good manual and we've got support here. But to help you grow your business, you need to have a background in understanding some of these figures and numbers so that you can know if your business is doing well going forward. And that's, I think, is more of a challenge at the outset. The next one that can happen to, certainly at the beginning stages, is overtrading. So number 30 on the list. And overtrading is basically whereby you've got sales coming in left, right and centre, and it might be that you are offering payment terms to your customers. It might be 30 days, it might be 60 days. But in order to keep up with that, you're having to order lots and lots of stock. Or if you're manufacturing, you're having to pay wages, you've got factory running costs, you've got the raw materials, and you're having to pay for all those up front. And ordinarily what happens is where your cash outflows are greater than your cash inflows causes overtrading. So what ends up happening is you either run out of working capital or you have to borrow in order to keep going. Of course, then by borrowing, that adds another expense to your business, interest. So you really need to be careful with overtrading at the outset when you're setting up your business plans and you're looking at your cash flow forecasts. Make sure that there's a balance between the payment terms you give to your customers versus the payment terms you can secure with your suppliers. I have already touched upon number 31, and that's about working in the business rather than working on the business. Now, I admit at the outset this is more of a challenge because you'll have to be doing a lot of the stuff, and depending on whether you've got the working capital and the investment to employ people at the outset or all the numbers of people you need to have, you will be needing to do a lot of the work, and a lot of that work could revolve around the working in the business. So as you progress, the challenge is to find the time to step back, find the time to address the business plan, address how you're going to grow the business, address how you're going to look at strategies, how you're going to review what your competition is doing, and all these sort of things. I'd always suggest as well that you do this away from the business. You're working on time. Set aside time in your diary. Of course, this will be easier once you have got staff on board, and find somewhere to do this quietly. And if you can find someone to do it with, a mentor is a good idea, where you can sit and brainstorm with somebody about how to take your business forward. That's even better. So in conclusion, I think this is complete, but I'm sure there are other ideas that you might be thinking of, and there may be other ideas that come to me as the days go by. And if I do think of them, I will come back and I will post them or update this blog article. But I think one thing is for sure, though, is that business owners, or certainly the ones that I've met, are very resilient. And if you are an entrepreneur by heart, you'll overcome most of the challenges that you are faced with. That's all I have to say for now. Well, thank you for listening to me, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again, and bye for now.